What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football from Up North podcast. It's Clayton here, riding solo for this Week 13 waiver wire edition. Not a whole lot of sexy names coming out of this week, but I do got a few names for you that may help you, in your quest to get into the playoffs and maybe help you to move forward as well. First thing I'm going to go through is just some injury updates from some injuries. We did have a few big names go out this weekend. So we'll start with Travis Etienne, left foot injury. Peterson did come out today and say that he was cleared to return to yesterday's game. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I quite believe that. I mean, we know his his history with foot injuries. Although this is the other foot that he did hurt this past week. So, I mean, Peterson did say he expects Etienne to be eased back into practice this week, and he has a chance to play. Take it how you want, but you just got to remember that it is coaches don't really care about your fantasy team. So just kind of keep an eye on the practice reports. Both Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson, both gone for the year. Elijah Mitchell is now out until playoffs. MCL sprain. He's expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks. So basically his regular season's over. Couple other guys, Damian Harris, thigh injury, is doubtful for week 13. So, I mean, Ramondre Stevenson, you're firing him up. Jacoby Myers, shoulder injury. Christian McCaffrey, left patellar tendonitis. So probable for week 13. I think I did read that it's something that he's going to be able to manage throughout the year or rest of the year. So, basically, I think you're still okay. Maybe you're tempering your expectations a little bit on what he is capable of. Deebo Samuel's probable for week 13. He's just going to have to deal with this hamstring soreness for pretty much the rest of the year. So hopefully for those Deebo Samuel owners, if you do, maybe we're going to see a little bit more of him coming out of the backfield. With this, with McCaffrey kind of banged up here. Michael Carter, ankle sprain, questionable for week 13. He got ruled out pretty quick yesterday, so I'm pretty doubtful that he's going to be back. And Rex Burkhead is in the concussion protocol. A couple other guys talk about Justin Fields, left shoulder sprain week to week, questionable for week 13. If I was the Bears, I'd be shutting them down for the rest of the year. Don't take a chance. They're not going anywhere. Matthew Stafford, neck injury. He's out week 13. There's talk that he could be out for the whole year. Aaron Rodgers now, right thumb fracture, rib injury. He did leave Sunday's game with an oblique rib injury. Did not return. And now I feel as though I know he's tough. He likes to play through injuries, but I have a feeling that they're going to probably sit him out this week and go into the bye. So he's got at least a couple weeks to recover from this injury and stuff like that. So that's all I got on the injury front for the time being. First thing before we jump into waiver wire show, as you can see if you're watching it on YouTube, 247 Clash here sent me some swag. They did partner up with the Fantasy Football from the podcast this season. And I just want to tell you guys a little bit about it. It's basically DFS has blown up basically over the years, and what's frustrating, you see the same people winning every single week. It's the same guys. 1.3% of DFS players are professionals. It's their job to do. I mean, I got a full-time gig. This ain't it. But I don't have time to research as much as these guys do. This is their job. This is how they win a ton of money, and it's usually these guys that are taking home 90% of the pots. But 247 Clash has changed the game. It's a DFS site that is player versus player format based on fantasy points. So each week you're basically given a set number of games, a set number of lines, pardon me. And then basically the person with the most correct wins the pot. So let's just say, for example, a line, for example, would be like say, for example, for tonight, last night's game here, we had, Matt Ryan and Kenny Pickett. Basically, if Matt Ryan was favored by, 5.5 fantasy points, basically it's point spread. You pick and choose how you want. There could be multiple winners, and basically whoever has the most wins the pot. So you have to be a Canadian resident to play. So, I mean, the lines for the weekly pool are out Wednesdays. So if you want, I would love you guys to run over to www.247clash.com, sign up and deposit using referral code North, and start playing this weekend with us. It's a great time. We will touch a little bit on it on Wednesday as well, with some of the lines that did come out. So, like I said, if you want to head over there, www.247clash.com, referral code North. Obviously, it will help the podcast immensely, and we would appreciate it. So, without further ado, let's just jump into this waiver wire edition. Like I mentioned earlier, not a whole bunch of sexy names coming out this week, but there's a few guys that I do want to touch on. First one I'm going to touch on a little bit higher owned. I go by Yahoo ownership. I usually like to keep it under, guys that are owned under 50%. But this guy, because he is, still available in 45% of leagues, I got to touch on him a little bit. Gus Edwards, Baltimore Ravens, 55% owned. Edwards back. We saw Edwards back in the lineup after being inactive in Week 11, just banged up a little bit. Solid outing. Carried the ball 16 times for over 50 yards in the score last on Sunday. Had over 80% of the carries, proved that he is and will be the lead back when he's in the lineup. There is talk about J.K. Dobbins coming off the IR. I still think, though, because of Edwards' ability to get in the end zone, and when he's in the red zone, he's the favorite to carry that ball. I think he's even with Dobbins in the lineup, I do feel as though he's still an RB3 with RB2 upside, just based on opportunities in the red zone, like I said. So, and best part is the Ravens face absolutely horrendous Broncos team who just gave up over 175 yards on the ground to the Panthers running backs this past weekend. So, if you got a ton of fab left, I would be blowing quite a bit on him. I'd be very aggressive getting him because, like I mentioned, even if Dobbins does come back, I still like Edwards' upside. Next guy I'll talk about is Zonovan Bam Knight for the Jets. 0% rostered. And to be honest, I had no idea who this guy was up until I watched the Jets yesterday. After Carter left the game with an ankle injury, they turned tonight. He was their number one back with James Robinson, a healthy scratch. That just lets you know a little bit something about apparently his nickname's Bam Knight. He's been outperforming Robinson in practice, and I think the Jets like him a little bit more. He led the team in snaps, played over 47% and rushed for almost 70 yards on 14 carries and added another 34 yards on 3 catches. So he's very good in the passing game, which we like with, Mike White running the show there. He's probably going to get some looks out of the backfield. Even if Robinson is active next week, I do feel as though Knight's still going to operate as that lead back. I know there are going to be a lot of people that'll probably argue that, but because they did go out there and trade Robinson. But is Robinson really healthy? That's my question. Being a healthy scratch yesterday, I mean, I know he hasn't been on the team very long, but to be a healthy scratch, considering basically it's Robinson or Zonovan Knight, and Zonovan Knight is the one that gets to go to. So I don't know. I'm not really keen on Robinson at all this season moving forward, but I do like Knight, especially what I saw on Sunday. I'd be throwing 20 to 30% at him this week, even against a tough Vikings team on tap next week, just because of the fact if he is good out of the backfield catching the ball. I mean, you're going to see a lot of dump offs from Mike White because that Vikings defense can get at the QB. Next guy I had on my list, but I no longer do but it all depends. I'm going to throw it out there anyways, just because, this was before the Etienne news. I had done this last night. Jermichael Hasty of the Jags, 3% rostered. Etienne, like I said, Etienne left Sunday's game with foot injury. And Hasty took over as that lead back, playing almost 80% of snaps. I know that they went and got Henderson, but my concern about Henderson is we know he's a productive back. But why was it only one team that put a claim in him when he was on waivers? That's what I would like to know. I don't know if he's banged up, but there's something going on there. And just watching Jermichael Hasty, he wasn't very effective on the ground. Only rushed 28 for on 12 carries for 28 yards. But he made his bread in the receiving game, caught all 5 of his targets for almost 70 yards and a score. So PPR, I mean, you're loving those numbers. And like I mentioned earlier, with Peterson saying that Etienne is fine, he has a chance to play next week. I originally said I'm going to go, 20 to 25% of fab on him this week. I'll lower that a little bit, but keep in mind if the practice reports aren't there, and Hasty, maybe people are just scared off from Hasty, and he's just sitting there on your waiver wire. I would go scoop him if you could get him for free, just to put him on your roster, just to see how this is going to shake out with this Etienne injury. So they do have a very favorable matchup next week against the Lions. So we all know that running backs can score fantasy points against the Lions. So like I mentioned, I would still go get him if I'm an Etienne owner. I mean, I'm not putting 20 to 25% on him, but I'll still put a little bit of a bid to try to get him on my roster. My top receiver this week is going to be Treylon Burks. He's owning 51% of Yahoo leagues, but I personally don't know how he is still available in any leagues. He's clearly the best receiver on this team. He's had two productive weeks back to back. On Sunday, he caught 4 or 6 targets for 70 yards. Now has 11 catches on 14 targets for over 180 yards during the past 2 games. So that's consistent. That's as consistent as they come when it comes to the receiver position. He seems to be turning into Tannehill's guy. I know he's still playing behind Ikine or whatever his name is and Robert Woods, but I mean he's the man. He's the man there. He's a much more efficient receiver, and I think that Tannehill loves him. So I mean he does have a tough matchup next week against the Eagles, but I mean you can flex him out based on volume alone, and the Titans are going to play from behind anyways against this, so they're going to have to throw the ball. That's what I mentioned with Burks getting the targets. I do think that he's going to be an easy flex option this week, and I'm throwing about 20 to 25% of him on this week ahead, because especially fantasy playoffs, these are the type of guys that can make or break your fantasy game. I mean, or fantasy playoffs. I mean, they can win you a league if they're on your roster. So this is something to look at moving forward. Another guy had a big game last week, Zay Jones, Jags, 25% rostered. He was my sleeper actually this week, and he finished as a wide receiver 4 on the week so far. Caught 11 balls for over 140 yards on 14 targets. So, I mean, Jones to me is an every week starter, considering he's playing just as many snaps as Christian Kirk. Seems to have a big role on this team. 21 targets over the last 2 games. Maybe game script, maybe they did take Christian Kirk out of the game, but still doesn't matter. Volume is king, and especially in that last that 2-point conversion that Zay Jones got to win the game. I mean, quarterbacks have to trust the guy in order to make that play happen, and that's exactly what they did. That's why I do think Lawrence loves Zay Jones, and I do think that he's worthy of a start every single week. And like I mentioned earlier with Hasty, they are up against the Lions defense this week. Are this weekend that are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So you could feel comfortable throwing 10 to 15% of your fab at him on him this week and start him. Heading over to the tight end position now, we got Foster Moreau still available in 60% of leagues. It's time. I mean, tight end position is tough to find a consistent contributor. I mean, outside of the Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce. But if he is available, go and get him. You can stream him. He's playing almost every single snap, and he's seen a ton of targets every week. He's averaging 5+ targets a game, has over 30 yards in 5 straight games. Not to mention he has scored in 2 of the last 3. So we're talking productive. We need a guy that's going to catch 5 balls, 30+ yards and find the end zone. If he can find the end zone every other week, that's the kind of guy that I want on my team, especially if I'm struggling at the tight end position, which most people are. The Raiders have a great matchup next week against the Chargers. They're allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to tight ends. So Moore is a must-add and startable this week and beyond. He's worth about a 3 to 5% fab bid. So if you do need a guy desperately and you need somebody to fill in now to make that pushed for playoffs, I would be a little bit more aggressive, to be honest with you, in getting him, because you are going to get production out of him. So he would be a guy to go and get. Few other options that I have now that I had written down. Number one, keep an eye on the Najee Harris injury. It looks like it's, Benny Snell is taking over the duties right now. Uh, so just kind of waiting to see on that. But Nico Collins for the Texans, 24% owned, seems to have taken over that top option in Houston. Double digit fantasy points in 5 of the last 6 games. And game script, right? Texans are going to play from behind every single game. And that's why I do feel that Collins is a wide receiver 3/4 every week. Kendall Hinton for the Broncos, 1% owned. Saw 9 targets on Sunday, operating as that number 2 receiver behind Sutton. Based on volume alone, he's worth taking a shot on. Kyron Williams for the horrible LA Rams, 36% owned. Rushers with the letters, and has outsnapped Cam Akers for 2 straight weeks. So they do seem to be trying to get him more involved after coming off of injury. So I think it's just a matter of time before he takes over this backfield. Last name I got here is a big name, is Jameson Williams for Detroit. 39% owned. This is the week that he looks like he's going to make his debut and has a good matchup against the Vikings. So grab him now, because this is the type of guy that could be a huge factor for you in fantasy playoffs, and possibly win you a championship. So that's going to take care of my week 13 waiver wire ads this week. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, feel free at Canadian Clay FF or at FF from up north. Reach out to me. We do have a private Facebook group on Facebook. If you want to find fantasy football from up north, get an ad to that. That'd be great too. Check out our YouTube channel and our rankings and all that stuff over on our website at fantasyfootballfromupnorth.com. So outside of that, we'll talk to everybody on Wednesday when we come back with our week 13 slouch, vouch, and the sneaky episode. And don't forget, www.247clash.com. Head over there, use referral code NORTH, and jump on there and get in the fun of playing some point spread with fantasy points for player versus player. I will leave all the info in the show notes. So until then, talk to you soon. Peace.